It has been a while since overrated talentless hack Kurt Busiek has made an appearance in one of my videos. This is Avengers the odd name for a comic. This is issue number 8 and this is a viewer requested review. A proud member of the official Son of Nimrod Cum cult, aka the Spunk Brigade, they requested, very specifically, this issue. They asked to be anonymous, which I will respect. Unfortunately though, she, or rather they, because it is all anonymous, they explained why they wanted me to review this issue. And in doing so, they have put stuff into my mouth. A bit like Marvel editor Gordon B. Shite does with his young assistant Eva Antelaz. Burning satire there. I'm dead proud of that. Now, on one hand, I didn't want to be swayed or convinced of something before reading it, but on the other hand, the words they used are fucking perfect. This is not a comic book. This is a lecture. It's written by Kurt Busiek and edited by Tom Beaver. And the entire comic is just Kurt Busiek sitting us all down to tell us how much he allegedly loves comics and how he can fix them even though they are not broken. For starters, do you remember that stick there? Hold on, actually. Do you remember this stick? This stick here. It is from Avengers 133, and that is its only appearance. It is a stick. It is a magic stick. A magic stick that allowed a character to go back in time to see their own origin. Simple idea, innit? The stick never appeared again and it was never really important. Well, think again. Kurt Busiek, he loves comics so much. He has brought that stick back and its only appearance in Avengers 133, well, it doesn't count. Because you see, the stick is and always has been a fucking alien in disguise. This is the Space Pants Man. He is from Avengers issue number 2 from the Silver Age, and he has been in a few other things. Interestingly, only one story after this issue. This issue is Kurt Busiek fucking retconning everything that he can to make his shit little story seem brilliant. That is the mum from Married to Children. I always thought she was canny hot. Like, much hotter than the daughter. Like, I really used to fancy her and wish that she was my wife. In this one, Kurt Busiek, he takes it upon himself to take this very minor character, the Space Pants Man, and completely retool him and retcon everything about him just in order to allow him to ignore most of the character's scattered appearances. Namely, we had the character's origin. Space Pants Man, his origin was told in an issue of 282, I think. It had Space Pants Man as an alien who came from the planet Pants World, and that made sense. That worked with his other appearances. It didn't contradict anything that we had seen. The handbooks, they said that as well. Maybe the handbooks came first and it was the 4 issue that showed it. But nah, it doesn't really matter because Kurt Busiek says that it was all smoke and mirrors, like all his fucking retcons. Remember Madame Masks? All her appearances after 1981, they were smoke and mirrors with defective clones. there's always some convoluted campaign of deceit just to allow Kurt to reimagine characters and concepts and history into a pile of self-serving shit. And the sickening thing about this is I have seen a lot of people say that this is the best Avengers story ever. I've seen people say it is the definitive Avengers story. I've seen them say that Kurt Busiek is the best Avengers writer ever, and that Kurt Busiek is the biggest Avengers fan more than anyone else. And I tell you what, if Kurt Busiek loved the Avengers, if he loved comics half as much as his idiotic fanboys insist that he does, would he feel it necessary to go back a fucking issue number 2 of the Avengers and retcon it? Fucking the second story ever told with the Avengers. Stanley Lee, Jack Quimby. It wasn't good enough for fucking fanboy Kurt Busiek. If Kurt Busiek is such a fan of the Avengers, he would not go through their fucking back catalogue the way he does in this issue. Avengers issue 2 doesn't count. Avengers number 10 doesn't count. The first appearance of Hercules Man doesn't count. He basically just goes through and says that it's all smoke and mirrors, as he always does. And it's somehow all a part of some scheme by a villain, and half the characters aren't who they say they are. In this, loads of characters were apparently space pantsmans. And Avengers number 10, the first appearance of Kronos, doesn't count. Hey, remember in Avengers 10 when the Enchanter, the beautiful, beautiful lady, the Enchanter, remember when she used magic to turn back time? Doesn't count. Stanley Lee and Jack Quimby on Avengers needs retconning. Hey, remember in the 90s? God, the 90s were shit, weren't they? Kurt Busiek, he hates the 90s. Well, in the 90s, they didn't even offer up a picture for this one. In the 90s, they had this idea that was meant to salvage Ant Gordon's character a bit. When he hit his misses in the 80s, the idea in the 90s was that actually his whole breakdown might have been caused by the manipulations of the Master of Time, Kronos. Well, no, it doesn't count. It was all a lie. Space Pantsman, aka Kurt Busiek, finds it fucking hilarious that you would ever accept anything from the 90s as actual fucking canon. Hey, let's not just limit ourselves to Avengers comics. Let's go back and retcon fucking Stanley Lee and Jack Quimby Silver Age 4 stories. Let's retcon the very first Marvel DC crossover. Spider-Man meets Superman. It doesn't count. It was all Space Pantsmans. Of course, that fourth story with the Space Pantsmans, that's got to go. They didn't have a home planet. That can't work with Kurt Busiek's agenda. So let's just say this was all smoke and mirrors. Hey, remember how he could use his hammer for timey-wimey Mr. Shenanigans? Well, that was smoke and mirrors as well. Hey, remember the Kree-Skrull War? One of the most well-regarded Avengers stories of all time. One of the first major story arcs in the Marvel Universe. Well, Kurt Busiek, he loves the Avengers and their history so much that he is retconning the Kree-Skrull War. It was all fucking Space Pantsmans and smoke and fucking mirrors. Let's just retcon everything, but acknowledge and validate the last Avengers story. A fucking hideous, out of continuity graphic novel written by one of Kurt Busiek's friends. Let's say that That horrible book actually counts, unlike all these shitty Stanley Lee and Jack Quimby stories that didn't count. Advert break, good chance to calm down. Milk in it. Have a glass of milk. Unless you're intolerant to lactose, not races of people. She-Hulk's there. Hashtag make She-Hulk's milk good again. She-Hulk's milk should be good enough to bring all the boys to the yard. Hey, remember the Vision and Scarlet Witch? They were like the Avengers' big institution. They were kind of seen as the core of the book, like the heart of the team. Their relationship was entirely built up and brought to life exclusively within the pages of the Avengers comic. Let's retcon that. Their relationship, it doesn't count. Hey, Avengers 102 doesn't count. Space Pantsmans. Hey, Avengers 105, Smoke and Mirrors. Avengers 135 doesn't count. Space Pantsmans and Smoke and Mirrors. Gigantic sized Avengers number 4, the wedding of the Vision and Scarlet Witch, as well as 2 other characters, doesn't count. Remember when the Scarlet Witch and the Vision, they had children, which has already been retconned. Let's retcon that again. But don't be thinking that Kurt Busiek is just racist against the East Coast. No, he hates the West Coast Avengers as well. Remember one of their main villains? Well, he doesn't count. Hey, remember Jason Byrne's run on West Coast Avengers where he retconned the Vision? Let's retcon all that. Let's say that retcon was all smoke and mirrors. Why stick to just the Avengers? Kurt Busiek, he's being given free rein by a bumbling, talentless tithead like Tom Beaver. So let's retcon Fantastic Force Annual number 4. Back to the Avengers here. Let's retcon once again Avengers 133, 134 and 135. Let's retcon the very first appearance of the Vision, Avengers 57. It doesn't count. None of it counts. It was all Space Pantsman's lying there. These double page breaks are helping. I'm finding that I'm swearing a lot less. Now the fucking bastard cunt cockshit and prick twat is back at it. This is Jason Byrne's run. Let's take a sledgehammer to his entire run on West Coast Avengers. Scarlet Witch and the Vision doesn't count. Remember when the original Human Fire came back to life? Smoke and Mirrors. What about West Coast Avengers 52, where they fought Satan and Scarlet Witch found out that her kids were created by magic? Space Pantsers. We're deep into the 90s now, and the 90s are the worst ever. Everything was shit in the 90s, despite this comic itself coming out in 1998. Remember Operation Galactic Space? It was a crossover in the 90s, so it was shit, and it were all Space Pantsmans, mate. It doesn't count, it's the 90s. Obviously, it is all shit. Remember the big ending to Operation Galactic Space, where Iron Man and Captain America had a huge falling out because Iron Man, he wanted to kill the architect of galactic genocide. That was brilliant. It was a really satisfying ending. It was like putting the characters in a real moral quandary. The characters who opted to kill, these ones here, they weren't necessarily wrong. The war criminal killed trillions. If he were trialed on Earth, he would be sentenced to death. But Iron Man took it into his own hands because, well, the baddie, he was an alien and likely couldn't be tried on Earth. But Of course, it's at odds with upholding justice and whatnot, and it created a fantastic divide between the Avengers. Nope, Iron Man and the rest don't count. It was all smoke and mirrors. Remember Life Cry from the 90s? Doesn't count. Remember Darth Knight from the 90s? Space Pants Man. Remember the 90s? From the 90s? Smoke and mirrors. Hey look, there is Onslaught Man. A truly awful character and story from the 90s. And if any story deserves to be retconned, it would be this one. But it's not been retconned. Why is this one of the few stories that Kurt isn't demolishing? Could it possibly be because it is written, again, by one of his friends, Martin Quaid? I expected Kurt Busiek, he would break Onslaught Man as thoroughly as he breaks this story here. This is the cross-dressing from the 90s. A bad story. It was a broken story, but rather than try and salvage anything or try and make it better, Kurt Busiek breaks it more. He turns every character in the cross-dressing into a space pants man in disguise. Even though we were often privy to the internal monologues of some of these characters, or we had scenes between the characters where no one else was around and they just acted like the real deal. The cross-dressing is considered one of the worst Marvel stories ever, and the retcons here are one of the most intrusive of all these retcons in this issue. He really takes this broken story and takes pleasure in making it so that it is just completely a shambles now. There were one or two good ideas in the cross-dressing. The people who wrote it were trying. They wanted to tell a good story and they just didn't. Now Kurt Busiek though, because he thinks it is shit and he is better, he has retconned the whole thing into being a quivering mess of nonsense. With Kurt Busiek's retcons here, every character in the cross-dressing was smoking some mirrors or whatever. He has acknowledged a story is bad and has just gone out of his way to force the story into being even worse so that everyone has to agree with him and agree that it is definitely a bad story. And he has done a great charity to comics to retcon a story like this rather than just ignore it. And to end it all, he has Aunt Gordon turned traitor. That's a real love for these Avengers characters, that he's just spent an issue carrying out a controlled implosion of their entire publishing history. And this is repulsive as well. He is so proud of his apparent love for continuity that he has included a fucking page pointing out all these stories that he has referenced. All the stories that he loves so much that he has just broken. And by the way, I'd like to point out, I did not refer to this once in naming all the issues retconned, because I actually love the Avengers and their comics, unlike Kurt Busiek. This has got a thick cover, it's like cardboard, and I am weak. Really, really weak. I struggle to rip regular comics. I want to destroy this though. I don't know if I can, but I want to take glee in destroying this. This is not a comic. It's a lecture. A lecture by a vain piece of shit with an ego and a burning hatred for anything not written by himself. Edited by a fucking piece of worthless lint scraped out of a fucking Hoover that has been abandoned for years in the sewer from the Resident Evil 2 remake. This is one of the worst excuses for a comic ever printed. Seriously. There is nothing but vanity and disgusting ego in this pile of venomous crap. I rate this sub piece of shit 710 thumbs down.